Hey, it is another Monday. It is a fresh start to the week and time for us to take a look at business ahead of this week. As usual, brought to you by Capital Legacy, your number one provider of wills and estate administration. Chris Gibbons is over in Germany this week. Well, he's been there for the past 3 weeks, actually, but is out of contact today. So we bring in another old friend of the Mansfield tribe, in the form of business journalist Chris Buchanan. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Jeremy. I hope you are well.
I am, as you see me, radiant and beautiful. Nice to see you again. Plenty to talk about today. The one thing on the minds of people wanting to travel is this UK's COVID travel system. But it looks like there may be some good news on the horizon. Tell us what the latest is there.
Well, Jeremy, according to a weekend report out of the Sunday Telegraph in London, the decision to drop South Africa off the red list could come as early as Thursday this week. And it's estimated the current list of 54 countries will be cut to as few as 9. The only stumbling block, a robust enough vaccination certificate. There were lots of negotiations last week. We put the science across to UK authorities through data and expertise of local doctors and epidemiologists, reminding them that South Africa had lower caseloads and better test and tracing data than many of the countries that they took off the red list a couple of weeks ago. We also had President Cyril Ramaphosa on the phone to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, putting our case across in a persuasion effort to open up the travel corridor between the two countries. As you know, traveling to the UK means 10 days of quarantine in an overpriced hotel room on arrival, or circumventing the process by spending 10 days in a green list country before entering the UK. Both options coming at a considerable cost.
And in the meantime, the tourism sector continues to bleed.
Well, indeed it does. Chifiwa Chivengwa, CEO of the Tourism Business Council of SA, reckons South Africa's tourism industry loses around 26 million rand every day the country remains on the red list. The Bureau for Economic Research in Stellenbosch says the tourism sector lost about 164 billion rand in domestic and international visitor spending in 2020 as a result of the restrictions. Add to that, a loss of 1 million jobs between 2018 and 2020 in the tourism sector value chain, and the contribution to GDP halved to just 3% last year from 7.2% in 2018. Lord Peter Hain, who's on our side all the time, also vocal in an open letter to Boris Johnson last week, imploring him to drop South Africa off the red list. So all eyes on Thursday, and hopefully a better prospect for the tourism season.
President Ramaphosa finally released the findings of the SIU into digital vibes, and former Health Minister Zweli Mkhize.
It's been a long time coming, Jeremy, having been handed over to the president in mid-July, and doesn't paint a pretty picture for the former minister who's gone from hero to zero amid the COVID-19 crisis. The report outlines improper, possibly unlawful instructions from Mkhize to the then Director General of the department, Precious Matsoso, to appoint Tahira Mather as a communications expert relating to a departmental media campaign. Digital Vibes, run by Mather and her niece Nadira Mather, that was appointed in 2019 in November, paid an initial 46 million rand, a subsequent 85 million rand for the campaign. Turns out, Digital Vibes was a front for the two women because it's actually owned by a certain Radha Hiraram. And on top of that, Digital Vibes never paid company tax, nor did it make any VAT payments to the South African Revenue Services.
What about the suspect money that started changing hands after Digital Vibes was on board?
The former minister continues to deny that he and his family benefited at all from the money. The report tells another story, a story of significant cash paid to Mkhize's son for repairs to a property, the purchase of a vehicle, and a sum paid into his company account, totaling just short of 500,000 rand.
So what happens now?
Disciplinary process, Jeremy, that plays out with the precautionary suspensions handed out last week by Health Minister Joe Phaahla. He also apologized to the nation for what he calls an unfortunate saga and assures that no stone will be left unturned in getting to the bottom of the investigation. Interestingly, he also stressed he was never consulted in the appointment of Digital Vibes, even though he was Deputy Minister at the time it all went down. Added to the suspension of Director General Sandile Buthelezi by the President are Anban Pillay, Popo Maja, Patricia Ngobesi, Shireen Pardesi, Sifiso Dlamini, and Kolisi Zondi.
There's a lot of climate news going around at the moment with the big conference taking place at the end of this month. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'm seeing a lot more of this sort of rich country, poor country talk going on.
Well, Jeremy, it seems that way. In a rush to get a deal before COP26 climate talks in Glasgow at the end of the month, envoys from the US, the UK, Germany, France, and the EU, all led by the UK's COP26 envoy, John Merton, they held talks with cabinet ministers as well as business and unions, and that was to thrash out a climate deal worth 76 billion rand, the primary aim of which is to end South Africa's dependence on coal. Bearing in mind, we're the world's 12th largest emitter of greenhouse gases, thanks to coal-fired power, and 60% of our $302 billion economy is reliant on energy produced from coal. Now, Roger Baxter, who's the chief executive of the Minerals Council of South Africa, he said that SA miners supported the transition to low carbon economy, but as long as it's done gradually and responsibly.
Well, Gwede Mantashe also added an interesting strategy to the whole carbon reduction thing.
Well, there may be more to read into this in terms of power struggles at the top, Jeremy, but while envoys and cabinet were negotiating loans and grants in a transition to clean energy, Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe continued his commitment to coal by suggesting cleaner coal technology, which captures carbon, it stores it, and reuses it, mitigating the effects of excessive emissions. It's one of the criticisms of this net zero, if you want to call it, approach, where we continue to burn fossil fuel and put systems in place to counteract the emissions. Climate science will suggest that the numbers are pointing in the direction of a transition to clean energy and clean transport systems.
What sort of money are we talking about here when it comes to, let's take sub-Saharan Africa, and how much money would it take for sub-Saharan Africa to reach its goals?
Numbers quoted last week suggests the bill for a transition to clean energy likely to top 3.5 trillion rand.
Yes.
One thing's for sure, the fight against climate change does not come cheap. And according to our president, here comes the rich country, poor country thing. We deserve help from developed countries. Hence the visiting envoys. Well, since we're victims of what they did in the past, according to Cyril Ramaphosa.
Okay, let's move on. Tell us about this Gupta middleman on a golfing trip.
His name is Kuban Moodley, a middleman between state-owned entities and the Gupta Link companies. He appeared in the Palm Ridge Specialized Commercial Crimes Court, having been nabbed at OR Tambo, about to board a plane to Dubai. The state alleged he was trying to skip the country and evade charges of theft, corruption, fraud, money laundering, the usual. He said he was simply going to Dubai on a golfing trip with his family and had a return ticket to prove it. Granted bail of 150,000 rand, and it all stems from illegitimate proceeds through contracts improperly awarded by Transnet to Gupta Link companies Regiment's Capital and Trillion, we've heard of them before, to the tune of 1 billion rand. Moodley's company Albertime allegedly benefited to the tune of 307 million rand for making the introductions.
And I believe there have been some problems trying to attach his assets.
Well, in June last year, the investigating directorate obtained a court order to restrain his assets and cell phone records. He was supposed to then disclose his assets, hand over safety boxes. He didn't comply, so assets forfeiture seized the safety boxes containing jewelry, Krugerrands, and other valuables, which they said were a little light, and accused him of removing contents to hide evidence. When the state learned of his intended trip to Dubai, a preferred destination of escape for Gupta-linked cronies, it ordered his arrest on suspicion of dodging his looming trial.
We've clearly had enough load shedding from Eskom for a lifetime, but it now looks like it's going to rear its head digitally.
Well, the warning comes from, amongst others, Business Leadership SA CEO Busi Mavuso. It's after ICASA said it was pressing ahead with a plan to terminate the access to emergency spectrum. Now, that was introduced last year in response to COVID-19 lockdown and the expected spike in mobile broadband demand from people working from home or running their small businesses from mobile hotspots. It also eased network congestion and provided an opportunity for operators to lower costs to consumers. But as of the end of November, the emergency spectrum will be taken back and the auction process reinstated, which is counterintuitive, really, if the government is serious about creating entrepreneurship opportunities. Mavuso says they've seen a huge uptick during lockdown in much of the services sector, thanks to better connectivity. MTN says traffic through its network has doubled during the pandemic. So while the emergency spectrum goes away, we're back to limited data, having seen a huge increase in demand.
But I just don't understand why they would take it away. I mean, it's there, and it's there to be used, surely.
Well, that's the million gigabyte per second question, Jeremy. And it's all to do with the spectrum auction fiasco that's been dragging on for over a decade through ineptitude with the telecommunications department and ICASA, as well as a number of legal challenges of the process. Telkom challenged the process, saying it favored the two big operators, MTN and Vodacom. They have in turn launched legal bids to stop any favoritism for the smaller operators who've been given first pick of spectrum just to level the playing field. ICASA has now announced the auction will happen in March next year, preempted by applications in January and final bidder announcements in February. We hold our breath to see whether the process goes ahead without any more delays or legal challenges. Until then, technologies like 5G will have to wait, and Zoom calls will go back to those start and stop affairs. That's digital load shedding for you.
Okay, right. Just looking at the markets, I see the rand is being under pressure. What else have the markets thrown at us during the course of the week, Chris?
It's a tale of two regions that's creating uncertainty in the markets, and that means we're emerging markets. We get the raw deal. We've got the US confronting higher interest rates and a massive federal government debt that may see it unable to pay its bills, including civil servant salaries in October. It seems the cash being injected into the economy through the Fed's bond purchasing program is not making its way into the administration. So then there's China facing an economic slowdown, a credit bubble in its property development sector, and continued regulatory crackdowns on sectors like technology. So what does that mean for our markets? Well, first of all, interest rate hikes in the US mean the dollar is more attractive and stronger. That's bad for the rand. Second of all, the knock-on effect sees interest rates likely to rise domestically. That's bad for borrowing. Third of all, any slowdown in China is bad for commodity demand and prices, and that's bad for our mining companies. And last of all, a regulatory crackdown on technology is bad for market heavyweights, Naspers and Prosus. So the lagging third quarter in equity markets has got the fourth quarter off to a bit of a shaky start. JSE down 1% on the all share and top 40 on Friday, and the rand hovering around that 15 to the dollar.
But I saw a headline that we recorded a budget surplus. That's certainly got to be good news, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is good news, particularly for Treasury's efforts to bring spending in line with revenue. And it's the first quarterly primary budget surplus recorded since 2018, so it's 3 years. The surplus is up by 9.8 billion rand in the first quarter of this year. It's a small figure, only 0.6% of GDP, but it's the trend in the right direction, Jeremy, after a 2.2% deficit in the previous quarter. So a couple of good things to start the week off, if you like, on the business front.
That's where we'll leave it. Chris Buchanan, thank you very much for stepping into the breach and helping us out while Chris Gibbons is not available. Nice to see you again and nice to chat with you, mate.
Always a pleasure, Jeremy, and always good to see you.
Good one. Chris Buchanan, business journalist at Buchanan Media. And that wraps up the business for today. If you did enjoy it, remember to subscribe, and we'll catch you next Monday, once again, courtesy of Capital Legacy, your number one provider of wills and estate administration, right here on Mansfield Today. Cherry bye.